The meeting of the Charter Commission's Public Safety Work Group will now begin.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Charter Commission's Public Safety Work Group. This meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 due to the declared local health pandemic. For the record, my name is Andrea Rubenstein, and along with Commissioner Tony Newborn, I am one of the co-chairs of the Charter Commission's Public Safety Work Group. I will now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so that we may verify the presence of a quorum.
Commissioner Kozak.
Here.
Commissioner Perry.
Here.
Commissioner Sandberg.
Here.
Commissioner Schwarzkopf.
Present.
Chair Clegg.
Here.
Commissioner Newborn.
Here.
Commissioner Rubenstein.
Here.
We have 7 members present.
Thank you. Let the record reflect we have a quorum. We will now proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. So, if the clerk could call the roll for adoption of the agenda. I guess first I got to ask, sorry.
Thank you.
The agenda for today's meeting is before us. May I please have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved, Sandberg.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second, Perry.
Okay. Is there any discussion before the clerk calls the roll? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion.
Commissioner Kozak.
Aye.
Commissioner Perry.
Aye.
Commissioner Sandberg.
Aye.
Commissioner Schwarzkopf.
Aye.
Chair Clegg.
Aye.
Commissioner Newborn.
Aye.
Commissioner Rubenstein.
Aye.
There are 7 ayes.
Thank you. The motion passes and the agenda is adopted. Item 1 on the agenda is the chair's report. And this week, I don't believe we have any. And so I will move on to item 2 of the agenda, which is interviews of the invited guests to answer questions regarding budget impact and the essential staffing needs of the Minneapolis Police Department. Our first guest is City Council Member Lene Palmisano, the Budget Committee Chair. And first of all, welcome, Councilmember Palmisano. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. And I believe you have some specific matters from our list of questions that you wanted to address. So I'll just ask you to go ahead, if that makes sense.
Sure. Actually, if we're going to go one by one, if I might be allowed to speak first, it might help set up our staff to add in their important pieces of it.
Sure. So if you'd like, then I'll read the questions.
I think so. I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And I haven't yet introduced the staff, so maybe I should do that now. We had it as item 2 on the agenda, but it makes sense for us to have more of a roundtable discussion than to address questions to specific people. And so I want to welcome and thank for being here our city's finance leadership team, which is Chief Finance Officer Deshani Dye, who's been here a month, and welcome and thank you for being here. Deputy Chief Finance Officer Lori Johnson, Budget Director Micah Intermill, and the MPD Finance Director Robin McPherson. So again, thank you all so much for being here, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. So I will move to our first question, and Please know also that although we have some prepared questions, members of the commission may also have their own questions. To your knowledge, have there been budgetary or fiscal impact analyses examining the proposal to create the new Community Safety and Violence Prevention Department? If so, what are the findings or recommendations? And if not, what should a budgetary or fiscal impact analysis entail?
This is Lene Palmisano. I can just start off by that. To my knowledge, I'll be curious if others have had inquiries. There hasn't been any official ask of our finance or budget departments to analyze what it would take to create a new department. And just to be completely candid, I feel like our budget department has been overwhelmed with their efforts at revising the 2020 budget just a few weeks ago, and then preparing for an unprecedented 2021 budget process without any additional staff and dealing with furloughs. So I would be surprised if they had any capacity to do so, even if they were asked. But I would leave it to others to chime in and tell me, or rather tell the Charter Commission what kinds of analyses has been done like that.
This is Deputy CFO Lori Johnson. I can speak to that. I agree with Councilmember Palmisano. To my knowledge, that analysis has not been done, nor have we been asked to do that yet.
I can answer. This is Robin McPherson from the MPD. I can answer from an MPD perspective. We have not been asked for any analysis at this point.
Thank you. Thank you all. The next question, if we're ready to move on to that. Has there been, excuse me?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner
Perry. There was two parts to your question. One was, had it been asked, and the other was, what would it entail? And right. I think I think that second part is as important as the first part.
Thank you.
So Chair Rubenstein, Commissioner Perry, to answer that question, what should a budget or fiscal impact analysis entail? I think that would be completely dependent on what the scope is of a new Community Safety and Violence Prevention Department. If that department includes law enforcement, then it would surely, hopefully, entail a lot of the different components that we currently use and currently function in our police department. If instead this is a build out of our Office of Violence Prevention, and if we as a city choose to keep these two entities very separate, then that means a different type of budget analysis altogether. I've been active and interested in what kinds of success or tracking metrics we will have for our Office of Violence Prevention, but we are 2 years into it now, and we don't seem to have metrics to measure its success by. We do, however, have some functions that have moved over from MPD into the Office of Violence Prevention, and those are programs that are often like national kinds of programs, and we have ways to track the success of those. I would lean on Robin McPherson to add anything that I may have missed here.
Thank you very much. This is Robin McPherson. I would like to add just one thing specifically that I think is often overlooked. Up until recently, the MPD has had a very stable workforce. I think for either violence prevention or law enforcement, that is critical, not only for the community, but also just for the city's infrastructure, and as well as just the training costs and the training lead time for both hiring and training. So I think the stable workforce is very important. Will that continue or not, I think is something that needs to be included in an impact analysis, along with the other things that you would traditionally include in an impact analysis, just the year one cost versus ongoing costs, implementation, oversight, liability, I think is another big issue as well. And then the impact on the business climate and then tourism impact. So I'll leave it with that, and I'm sure Micah can add to that list.
Sorry about that. Just took a minute to get everything lined up here that I was looking for. I just pulled up our city's fiscal note guide, and that's the terminology we use to talk about sort of fiscal notes or fiscal analyses, excuse me. And so what that guidance really does is just says, show your assumptions around what sort of operational changes would need to take place, and then show your assumptions around what that would cost. So I think it's both a clear articulation of what the costs or savings may be, but is also, I think what's often missed is just the showing your work portion of an exercise. And so I think that would be important in something like this as well. But otherwise, I would agree with everything that Robin just said.
Thank you. Any other comments?
May I do a quick follow-up?
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When you do an assessment like this, and Councilmember Palmisano, I know you said it depends on whether there's a new department or not a new department, but in general, what kind of timeline does it take to do a fiscal analysis like that we're talking about here? Is it, and I'm looking for ballpark, is it a 6-month thing? Is it a 3-month thing?
Commissioner Rubenstein and Commissioner Perry, I'm not really sure how to answer your question because I don't know the last time we've really been through it. The last time we've been through it was perhaps to create the Office of Sustainability, which is much smaller and a different kind of ball of wax, so to speak. But in comparison, we have undertaken this year just a simple MPD staffing study. Not simple, it's actually rather complex, and it's supposed to analyze how sworn law enforcement use their time and see what the needs of our city are. And now that is something that had been proposed and worked on as a draft of a RFP proposal for approximately 3 months, and is expected to take the bulk of 2020 to give it a full undertaking and get results from it. So I would imagine that an analysis like this would be ballpark would be a year or a year and a half. But in conversation yesterday with Councilmember Cunningham, and I understand he's coming to speak with you next time, so I will let him speak for himself, but I understand this as being maybe more of an iterative process from his perspective of a building out of functions and then resourcing those functions, piloting them, et cetera, et cetera. So if that is the model and we are going through this process of co-creation with members of our community, then something like that I would anticipate would take years.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? So let's move on to the next question then, which is, and maybe this is partially already answered, has there been any shifting of programs or departmental divisions to begin putting in place the new proposed department? In other words, is the city closer to a plan along the lines of the new Department of Community Safety and Violence Prevention? And what about earmarking of funds for community engagement in line with the City Council's representation?
Well, commissioners, provoked by this question, and in looking at it yesterday, I did ask for a conversation with Councilmember Cunningham about some of this. I'll say that today, the only shifts that have taken place so far have been moving the positions of public information officer and there are one staff person, so 2 FTEs total, out of MPD and into the communications department. That occurred in July during the revised 2020 budget process, this summer. That was meant to correct originally for COVID-related costs and budget balancing. Other than that, I don't believe there's been any restructuring decisions made or implemented along those lines on a permanent basis. The last update we received regarding the city's plans to conduct the promised year-long engagement process for transforming public safety was a few weeks ago, and there Councilmember Cunningham explained that there would actually be a pre-engagement plan with the community to ask how people might want to be engaged in this process that would help to build out that full year-long engagement strategy. We have not received an update since then or any estimates on what those project costs are. As I said, when we received that update, I have a number of concerns about this pre-engagement process because it already seems to be confusing to the general public who want to follow it. And not to mention, we are months removed at this point from passing that resolution without actually undertaking that meaningful engagement. And I fear that we've been distracted by some of the other things at hand. So that's what I would offer on that. I don't know if city staff have anything else they would want to offer on that one.
Anyone else? Any other questions from commissioners? Seeing none, I will move on to our next question. Thank you, Councilmember Palmisano. Realizing that this is more a theoretical or even a philosophical question, how can the budget leverage cultural change in the Minneapolis Police Department? Are there budget-related elements or considerations, if any, which you believe could help enhance police reform? And are there any that might create obstacles to reform?
That was a thought-provoking question, and I think there's a number of ways to look at it, right? Sometimes I feel that some of the obstacles to reform here were from a few years ago when it was the will of the council to remove and create a whole separate Office of Violence Prevention, right? I understand why people wanted to do that so that it would be under the purview of city council, and they would have more control over it. But I think that sometimes ends with people inside City Hall getting a little too worried about where something sits instead of really leveraging that bigger picture, that bigger cultural change, and enhancements to police reform change for the department. I have always advocated for, I continue to advocate for in this budget, that adding more FTEs to our audit department for policy, programmatic, and investigatory audits of MPD would be an excellent and strategic place to start. Over the last several years, our audit team has been the main driver outside of MPD of reviewing existing policies and offering concrete implementable changes. Examples include body-worn cameras, the hiring of more women and people of color in our department, off-duty work and recommendations for that, partnering on how we can work through and manage sexual assault kits when there were more found than had originally been understood that we had. With such a small team and other broader enterprise-wide responsibilities, the audit department is very limited in what they can take on in any annual work plan, and adding adding more staff would really allow them to expand their workload each year. It would also allow the city to continue the work of the Minnesota Department of Human Rights that you're aware of after their one-time investigation with us concludes. In my experience, our audit team has worked really hand in hand with PCOC, the Police Conduct Oversight Commission, and some of the staff resources there to work together on things that help to drive us forward, I think, on police reforms. I'd invite anyone who has a different opinion or more to add on that to go ahead and chime in.
Thank you.
Commissioners, this is Robin McPherson. I'd like to address a couple of things on Councilmember Palmisano. I agree with most of what she said, and I think that the audit side of things would be helpful. I think they've always been helpful in pointing out areas that need to be improved, pointing out opportunities. I think maybe more opportunities than anything else. So I would very much welcome that. I think that there's a pragmatic issue right now too with the COVID, COVID issues. Our FTE count has gotten so low that right now the MPD is really worried about basic policing, and it's very difficult to find the human capital to implement. And I know that's not a very good excuse, but at this point, it's somewhat of a reality of where we are right now. But I think that the other thing is we as a city don't really talk about having a cultural budget. And I think maybe looking at things strictly from a culture standpoint and how to avoid some of the silo effect that we get sometimes would be very helpful as well. So that's more of an internal, maybe something that we need to strive for internally, and certainly budget is not going to impact the silo effect. That's something that we just need to do as a priority. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else like to add their comments?
If I might piggyback on what Ms. McPherson said, you asked about how we leverage cultural change in MPD, and something that I've become especially passionate about these past few years is about wellness and how we create culture change by creating a healthy environment for employees, and how do we build resiliency in such a trauma-filled position like a patrol position in our MPD workforce. To that end, and Ms. McPherson has been a really great partner on this. We've been committed to and looking at how we train for that trauma. So one concrete example of that would be about PTSD. How do we, as a city, make sure that we are doing everything we can in the prevention area of PTSD, and then once, if it were to happen that officers are experiencing trauma based on their jobs, how do we quickly identify it? How do we quickly get them to get the help that they need to get better? These are budgetary issues, because if we don't work on the preventive side, we're going to have issues on the impact side of this, both for our workforce and then for the communities that they're responding to. So I just wanted to offer that as one of those things that Robin was mentioning before.
Thank you. We have a question from Commissioner Kozak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to ask something, and it's probably based maybe on out-of-date or sporadic information. But I remember when we first started this process back in June, when the mayor and the chief were here, there was some discussion going on, I think, within the department, where they made some major changes. Basically, sounded to me like cutbacks in the community outreach activity within the department. And I know the police athletic, the relationship with the police athletic league was going to change or simply be eliminated. And to me, removing those functions from the department, whether because of budget concerns or because they wanted to move that stuff out of the department, maybe into the new division, has always concerned me, because I thought we were trying to get away from the concept of a warrior department, where it sounds to me the only thing we're going to have left are the tough coppers out on the street, rather than some of these other activities. And I know they laid off, what were they called, community service officers, or I think I read 24. But I'm interested in someone can give me an overview of what's happening, if that's the direction the department is going, is eliminating or transferring those kind of functions out of the police department itself, having them simply eliminated, or just transferred out. Which direction is the department going?
So, Commissioner, this is Robin again, if I may address those comments. I believe in DC Forrest, while he's not on this particular panel, he is in the room, and so I would ask that he participate in this discussion as well, if possible. But those decisions were made primarily for just human resources. When we started losing people to leaves, our first priority is public safety, and so many of those people are actually now working in patrol. I think that all of us share your concern, however. Our intent is to maintain those, assuming that we have the staffing to do so. I cannot speak, however, for council's intention with the 2021 budget. So that would be something that you would have to ask the council members about. DC Forrest, is there anything that you want to add to that, maybe?
Thank you, Director McPherson. That fairly well sums it up. The changes in terms of resource allocation are being done solely to help us sustain staffing in our core functions. I know that in my conversations I've had with people that it's not that we don't value, or the chief doesn't value, the community outreach functions. They have great value, but if we don't have the staffing to support that, we're going to move some of our resources into patrol and investigative functions. And you are very accurate in the sense of the Police Activities League. It is designed to create that interface between police and youth, and provide good outreach and connect with kids in manners and in spaces that are not enforcement related. So if that were to be moved out from under the police department, it really would cease to not be the Police Activities League, and it would be a activities league for children. And I know that the chief is very much a big supporter of the various community outreach and functions, like the community engagement team, our procedural justice division, all the different things that we have been doing in those regards. But currently, we just don't have the personnel to staff those units without seriously impacting our ability to respond to calls or investigate cases.
Thank you very much. I understand, and I also understand the issue. The first job of the department is to respond to those 911 calls. I was on another meeting and someone asked me a question today. Speaking of that, was there some announcement today about how many sworn officers we had available for patrol? Some the 400 and some, and how many sworn officers do we have now? I know it keeps going down because of the people taking the leave. And how does that, if we're concerned about the shortage of officers, how does that square with the fact that the city is now canceling the new recruiting class, which I'm told was ready to go, but now they've canceled it. So I don't, if there's shrinkage in the department in the sworn officer complement, where are we going to get more if finally someone decides we do need some more people on the sworn officer side?
Well, to speak to some of this, I know that the chief did speak today and he did provide some numbers, and I was not on that meeting, so I don't know necessarily what he provided. I know that it would have been more than 400 or so, I believe, he probably gave numbers pursuant to staffing within the patrol bureau, which is what I supervise.
It was the patrol, they said.
Yeah. And I think he threw out numbers somewhere in the 530 range, somewhere, give or take. I wasn't on that call. And then obviously we have other bureaus within the police department. So he was talking about staffing just for the patrol bureau, and that seems fairly accurate from some of the numbers that I've seen. And those numbers can change daily. As far as the cancellation of the recruit class, I know that was a budgetary decision. And outside of that, and I guess I would hate to throw it back to you, Robin, but I don't know. I know that was a decision that I believe the mayor and the chief made together. But I don't know enough about that decision to speak to it as to how, anything further beyond that.
I can, this is Robin again, and I can address some of that. This was done in preparation or completion of the 2020 revision, and we were asked to find a certain amount of money, funding that would be available for, or would be reducing the MPD budget. And in order to get to that, that was one of the items that was chosen. We don't, as the police department or as a department within the city, even though our budget numbers appear high, we have very little in the way of we have very little in the way of discretionary spending. Most of our spending, in fact, I think this year it's about 77 to 78% of our budget is for payroll and fringe. And then we have internal service charges, utilities, direct supplies, crime lab supplies, and we end up with an extremely small number left. So in order to meet the budgetary requirements due to the COVID reduction or revenue reductions because of COVID, that was one of the choices to make. We were fearful that we would have to either do that or lay off people. And as you know, based on the Federation contract, laying off was obviously not the first option that we could use, and so that was why that was chosen.
Thank you very much, folks. That's very helpful.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say there was a study session today, which probably is what Commissioner Kozak was referencing in terms of the discussion. That study session agenda materials are posted in LIMS. I will reconnect into the chat for your convenience and then send out to all of you a link to those materials so you have them. But because I know she was present, it's possible that I don't want to put her on the spot, but Commissioner Palmisano, I know, was at the study session, so she may be able to speak to some of those points if there are any additional issues to raise that the chief did report to council at today's study session. So,
thank you.
Commissioners, this is Lene. I do feel that there was social media kind of misconstruing that number that was in the chief's presentation this morning. At our study session, the chief simply had a slide that reported that there were, what Deputy Chief Forrest mentioned, it was 535 total members of his department available for patrol at this moment in time. In the past, just for context, so say I think last year, pre-COVID, there were roughly 525 officers available for patrol. That means all officers actually on patrol through any and all shifts, including all the infrastructure, lieutenants, sergeants, inspectors, that whole bit. So I think that without assuming intent, what the chief was trying to show to the public today during the study session is that he has, out of need of the human resource constraints that were on, that he's had to take away all of the more progressive policing kinds of things that we have enjoyed and used to our benefit in the past, the PALS programs, the community service officers, and he has realigned his department to really focus on patrol and investigations. And so I think what he was trying to do was to give comfort to people in the public that we have just as much patrol being resourced as we have pre-COVID, and pre perhaps this kind of a much bigger amount of people in the process of leaving the department than were necessarily anticipated. So that shouldn't be too alarming for people, but unfortunately, as Commissioner Kozak mentioned, that's going to be hopefully effective in the short term, but in the long term, we want all these other functions back in our police department. It's part of what has created a very positive name and prototype of MPD in other parts of our country, and things that we've imported from other places that we know work with crime prevention and violence prevention.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this issue? I'll move on to the next question. And once again, this may be repetitious, but we'll see how it goes. How does the 2021 budget, presumably in draft form right now, reflect the need and desire for police reform? Specifically, are there new priorities or programs added to the budget from last year, or on the other hand, more shifting from the police budget? Or are there expansion of reform programs within the police department budget?
This is Lene again. I'll tee this up and other people can fill in. I think you're already seeing the council work to add resources through even our mid-year budget process that focus on violence prevention. A big indicator of that was our investment during this July budget process into the Cure Violence program. That was something that the chief and the mayor were certainly looking at, but the council, and I supported this, made, I believe it was a $1.2 million investment into Cure Violence and getting that program up and running this summer to see if that could have a positive impact on some of the disturbing trends we were seeing on violence across parts of our city. And while I do not know the details of the mayor's proposed 2021 budget yet, or what that's going to look like, I can only speak for myself as a council member, and that I have spoken to him about expanding our co-responder programs because I think they're under-resourced, and also adding a new one. I recently spoke to him about establishing a co-responder program geared toward addressing homelessness in a more coordinated way. This model would supplement the work that many of you know of that Sergeant Schneider is already doing by sending skilled practitioners to calls about new encampments popping up or people sleeping outside. That way, our first point of contact to these calls is someone who can offer professional expertise to help people navigate existing programs like coordinated entry at the county or other kinds of shelter services. But so I don't know. We don't have the details yet of the mayor's 21 budget, and it would be inappropriate for our budget office to kind of run out ahead of the mayor and share anything they might be working on with you all tonight. I do anticipate us getting those details from the mayor's budget on September 24th.
Thank you.
So if I could just jump in, Councilmember, so as the Charter Commission is well aware, there are requirements in the charter around a budget being presented by August 15th, and the mayor did meet that charter requirement, and that requirement really is more of a framework than what the city traditionally delivers each year. And the city traditionally delivers a very detailed, nearly 600-page document, and that document will be available on next Tuesday September 22nd, ahead of the Board of Estimate and Taxation's vote on the maximum property tax levy on Wednesday, the 23rd, and then on Thursday, the 24th, the Budget Office will be presenting a detailed overview to the City Council. So those documents, those details are forthcoming. I do think specific to what's asked in this question, though, the Mayor did at the meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation last week indicate that folks should expect that there will be cuts to all departments. So that level of detail is out in the public realm.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments? We'll move to the next question, which is even more directly related to the charter because of the charter provision on minimum funding, which of course is a big part of our focus. With respect to the proposed City Council charter amendment, deleting the minimum funding provision, can you suggest alternative language that would comply with state law requiring licensed police officers for certain kinds of arrests, and at the same time balance community safety and violence prevention and other alternative programs, such as the co-responder program? For instance, would perhaps a process rather than a number be helpful or not helpful? Or what do you see as the best approach to make a reasonable determination of staffing levels? And we understand, I should mention, that staffing efficiency study is still pending. So other than that, I think we're looking for perhaps creative suggestions.
Yeah, this is Lene. I'll just go ahead and chime in. I think the city's best tool to determine what our staffing levels should be right now is that staffing study currently underway, like you mentioned. How we staff a precinct on any given day or even any watch is incredibly nuanced, and it fluctuates even by season. I would rather have experts in that field take their time to provide us with recommendations than there to be something outlined that we have to, heed. I would also hesitate, I guess, to add more complexity to the charter, which might limit us from adding or subtracting to our complement of officers any given year. But that's just an opinion kind of question. That's just my opinion.
So then are you saying that it would be a good idea just to eliminate that provision?
I think so at this point in time. But, I think we need more discussion on it, which you guys are doing that work of.
Good, thank you. Would anybody else like to chime in?
This is Robin again. I would like to chime in. I think there is more discussion that needs to happen. Personally, and again, this is an opinion. I think taking the minimum out is concerning to me because I think that staffing for law enforcement has to be a long-term look. And my concern is that we don't want to have peaks and valleys over, years. So there has to be some acknowledgement that this should be a steady number, plus or minus, or plus for individual things that come up. But the cost of training, the cost of hiring, you don't want to see your workforce fluctuate to a great extent between years. So having a minimum creates a baseline and creates some stability and prevents large swings. Also, I think it indirectly sets minimum qualifications for a certain number of people, and I think that's not something that can be ignored either. So that's all. But again, I totally agree. This needs to be a discussion point by a lot of people.
Thank you. Commissioner Perry?
I think my question just got answered. I was wondering if there was a specific not a specific number, but whether the number that is in the charter right now is too low because of I know there's the staffing study, but we have on the force far more people than what the charter calls out for, far more officers and employees than what the charter calls out for.
I guess this is Robin again. I'll take a stab at that. I think there's a lot of opinions out there on what minimums should be in any law enforcement agency. And so, you could probably find support for a lot of different things. I think a lot of law enforcement agencies start with a minimum and then they adjust accordingly. So as an example, the Tucson Police Department has an incredible number of acres. It's just desert and certainly low density. And so they might adjust what is the average for the United States downwards and as a starting point. So I think there is a lot of nuance when it comes to what's best for each individual agency, but I think it is important to do.
I have a quick follow-up to that then. With the discussion around the legal definition of whether it's employees or sworn officers, do you think it should represent, there should be a number in there that talks about employees or sworn officers?
Well, Commissioner, that's a really good question. I think that, I guess I've assumed that that's sworn officers. That may or may not be correct. I agree it is a legal definition in that. I think that if you say that's total employees, that number, then you have a potential situation, which we found ourselves in back in the early 2000s, where a lot of civilian jobs the civilians were laid off and the officers were put into what had traditionally been or could be civilian jobs. And civilians are actually, in average, less expensive than sworn officers, and they're also trained and educated for their jobs. So you have to be careful if you say it's total, because you may have that situation happen again. And I think that's a poor use. To me, that's a poor business decision. It's poor use of resources. So I can't answer what the right way to do it is, but I know some of the pitfalls, and I think that is one of the potential pitfalls.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Metke?
Yes, I'm not quite sure who this question is for, and I apologize if I'm repeating something that's already been addressed, and if so, please tell me. I lost connection for a little bit, so I missed about 3 minutes of the conversation. And I understand the chief having empathy with people in the community in the study session and talking about how we actually have 10 more officers, FTEs, than the 525 that we had last year. But working downtown, living in Phillips, and being connected on the north side, and the increase in homicides and carjackings and violence, I am very concerned for the city of Minneapolis that the 535 on patrol is inadequate. And I just wanted to say that on the record. I don't know how that would impact the 2021 budget, but it's very concerning to me in where I live and work. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I believe Commissioner Sandberg had a comment or question.
Oh, no, I raised my hand because I saw Commissioner Metke and I didn't know if you saw her.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
If I may, Commissioner Rubenstein, just a little bit of context around that from my own perspective. I think you will see that in the past, it's often misreported as the chief asked for 400 more officers. That's not really the truth. There were follow-up questions from media like, well, what would solve all of our problems? You know, I think that's like asking our public works director, how much money would it take to fix all the sewer problems in Minneapolis, right? And our public works director might say $1 million kajillion. I believe that our chief's plan a couple of years ago was to, over time, have 40 additional FTEs in the police department. And some of his vision and thoughts around that I really personally signed up for was about things like community navigators. He saw a couple of years before the rest of us did that really police are asked to do so much and maybe more things than they necessarily need to be doing. So he had a plan that, yes, would add more law enforcement officers for things that are needed for peace officers to go and do. But he also had been looking for things that we could supplement and add other types of staff for. Now, his vision of that was within his own department. And I think it's fair to say council's vision of that might not necessarily be in the Minneapolis Police Department. We'll see what that staffing study says. Something that Director McPherson has helped me appreciate over time, over my 6.5 years here on City Council, is about the staffing curve and about, I guess in summary, I would say the idea that you can't order more peace officers off of Amazon Prime, right? They don't just show up tomorrow. There's a process, there's a long process, and there's a hiring curve, and we need to try to do our best to help that be smooth over time, or the ramp up time for new officers, no matter which of the three paths they come to be an officer in, will fall in awkward places, and we will see spikes and dips in our staffing. And that's something that I've really only come to appreciate through a lot of conversations with Robin McPherson. I think it's really interesting to talk about, to see where we lie on there's many lists out there. It's easy to Google the population versus number of officers questions, city to city. It's interesting to see where we fall. I feel that the place that we fall as a city and the number of officers that we have or had at the beginning of this year tend to more be in line with suburban communities who don't respond to the volume of types of calls that our MPD force do, that are resource intensive, that are very time intensive, and that are very difficult kinds of calls to take. Also, I think that overall the staffing question is so highly dependent on what we decide we're really asking of officers. If there's some nugget or insight that I have from the mayor about his next upcoming budget, it's that he will be looking to add more staff to 311 to take crime report only calls, like after the fact property loss kinds of calls, to try and, as one step in that direction of freeing up peace officers for the kind of work that they need to be doing, and acknowledging that that's not something necessarily that peace officers need to respond to and make part of their detail.
And if I may, Commissioner Rubenstein?
Certainly.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmisano. That was really great. But it also raises another question that I had in watching the latest budget revision. I was concerned that the most diverse class of recruits got cut, because you're right, it takes years to get to that point. And so to see that happen in the budget process was very concerning to me. So also I'm just putting that out there too and wondering your thoughts.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts are this: in our COVID adjustment to the budget, no department was immune, right? So we did across the board kinds of cuts to reduce our city's budget by $156 million in just a 5-month period of time. I think that was maybe a temporary way to make some of that money back, but they're still waiting in the wings, is my understanding. Deputy Chief Forrest, chime in if they're not. But my other understanding is I think the mayor is, I think this is public knowledge. I expect this is public knowledge that he's definitely adding back in that recruit class to help with our staffing needs in a fairly urgent way.
Yeah, DC Force here. I don't know some of the particulars, but I think it would be a little bit more of an HR clarification, but I think that there's less follow-up work that would need to be done if we were to bring back or re-extend hiring job offers to people that we had previously within a certain time frame, I believe. But I'm not 100% certain on the length of time that we have on that.
I would imagine, Deputy Chief Forrest, that if people were able to find jobs elsewhere, then it won't be entirely possible to re-extend offers. But of course, we can't possibly know that.
Yes, I don't think we would know. I think we would just. I guess I'm taking an educated guess that we would just re-extend offers to the same numbers and the same individuals that we did previously.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions or comments on this issue? Okay, we have one last question, at least in our pre-prepared questions, and that is, what, if anything, would you, any of you, all of you, offer from your professional perspective and experience that you think would be important for the Charter Commission to consider as it evaluates the current proposed amendment submitted by the City Council?
This is Lene. I can start that off. I guess I would say this. I fear that the earlier move to send the first draft of what a Charter Commission change would look like to you all, to the Charter Commission, was misconstrued at times as unanimous support for it. I did support the fact that the people of Minneapolis desperately wanted to have a conversation about what structural reform would be, that part of that might involve the city charter, but that was not a vote of substance to support the earlier amendment by my colleagues for the charter amendment. However, I would offer that in so many conversations, the people of Minneapolis desperately want something to say yes to in this moment, a change that makes sense. And so I very much appreciate how serious you've taken your work here and this deliberation, and all of the people that you've had to come to present to you and will be having to come to present to you as you take this extra 90 days. I'm going to look closely at your substantive report, and I would offer that maybe you could offer back some kind of suggestion of what would make sense from a charter perspective that the people of Minneapolis could say yes to. I would also offer that I take it seriously when we hear that real structural change is needed here. I take seriously, I think you all do, the importance of getting rid of structural racism in all levels of government, local government included. So I would be also interested in having conversations about what that means beyond the Minneapolis Police Department. For example, does our system of government, the local government level, currently work from your perspective? I want to acknowledge, and I do acknowledge in ward forums, that our current level of government, like the 13 council members and our working relationship and how everything flows between mayor and council and police chief, was built on a chassis from the 1800s. And I don't think that that necessarily helps respond to the day-to-day needs of our community anymore. I'm not sure what that solution is, but I ask for your very qualified thoughts as we move forward over these next, 6 to 8 months of time, and I'll be reaching out to you individually.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? If our city finance leadership has some suggestions or thoughts for us, they would be most welcome.
And just a reminder to folks that you may be on mute and need to unmute yourself. Sorry.
I guess this is Robin again. I would really briefly want to thank you for having us all. And I agree, the thoughtful deliberation. We really, really appreciate the time you've spent in doing this. And I would hope that you would contact us all, or any of us, if you have any questions or concerns going forward. But again, I just want to thank you for including us in the discussion.
And we thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us. Are there any other questions from members of the Charter Commission?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Schwarzkopf.
The question I have is that if we had a Department of Violence Protection, or if we had an Office of Violence Protection as we do now, and then the police department, how can there be coordination back and forth so that as one department finds out about certain things that might affect public safety, it lets the other department know that so that we are prepared for those kind of things? And that's what I don't understand. How can this be coordinated? Can anybody explain that? Let me give you an example. When I was the city coordinator, the planning department was under the coordinator at that time. And one of the things I had the planning department do was to take a look at demographics. And as demographics changed within the city, we were able to predict what kind of different crimes might begin to occur. And so we were able then, through the Department of Planning, to notify the police department so they could be prepared for these different kinds of crimes that could come about because of demographic changes. Now, how does that work then when we have these two separate departments, or this office and the department?
Commissioner Rubenstein, Commissioner Schwarzkopf, I would just add that, yeah, that's why I brought up that earlier point, that I don't know how this works well as two very separated departments. I know that the people in them right now work very hard to be coordinated, right? Director Sasha Cotton with Chief Arredondo, but I don't think that the ideal setup for such a thing, just from a public safety perspective, you're talking about lots more demographic kinds of things, is well served by being siloed.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Commissioner Chair Clegg, you had a question?
Thank you. I think in terms of minimum staffing as regards to the charter, there are three alternatives, and I'm interested to hear if you can think of any others. But one would be to not say anything at all and leave it up to the council and the mayor. Another would be to be vague, like we are with the fire department, and say that funding it will be, quote, adequate, which to my mind just encourages fights and possible litigation about what constitutes adequate. And the third is to be precise, as I think the current language, whether you agree with it or not, is. I'm wondering if you have any other alternatives for us, and which of those alternatives you prefer. Thank you.
This is Lene Palmisano. I guess I think that kind of question begs the question of what's the job description for a peace officer? What are we expecting them to show up to every day? And how do we supplement other kinds of staff, non-sworn staff, to show up with them, right? So ideally, to me, in a co-responder world, we'd be able to resource more professionals, mental health professionals, to be able to continue to go along with police officers, yes, even during a global health pandemic. And that takes more resources, not less. I guess I need to acknowledge that in my ideas to improve policing in our city, these things take more resources, not less. So I guess I like I see it to be important to be dare I say, at least vague. I read the city charter, and I know you've had lots of discussion about this, is the number of staff in a police department, but maybe it should be about the number of staff in our city dedicated to public safety. And that staff is truly staff, sworn plus other civilians that assist with that effort in some way. I don't know how you would do that, but that would be my kind of just knee-jerk reaction. I think that's one of the hard parts about this that you all have in front of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Is there anything our guests would like to add just to sum up what we've been hearing or what your thoughts are that we haven't asked you? No.
I greatly appreciate you all taking the time. You're investing a lot of time in this investigation and looking at this from so many different perspectives. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmisano. Your suggestions and comments and responses have been invaluable to us and are greatly appreciated. And the same to the others of you that are here today. We can't thank you enough. If there are no other questions or comments, then we'll move to item 3 on the agenda, which is a discussion of next steps for the Public Safety Work Group. And I will just say that our next meeting is a meeting with the sponsors of the City Council amendment that remains before us. So they will be coming to our meeting next week. In addition, I might mention that Chair Clegg has done some work on the standards, reflecting some of the comments that were made. And so they may be ready to go to our next Charter Commission full meeting. And that's really all I have. So again, unless there are any questions or comments, we've concluded all business to come before the Charter Commission's Public Safety Work Group. And without objection, we stand adjourned.
Thank you, everybody. And Adrian, it is so good to see you back.
I agree. We missed you. And
Yeah, Kate.
This meeting is no longer being recorded or transcribed.
Bare minimum.
Oh, I don't know. At the risk of getting into trouble, Adrian is just a cutie. So no offense, Casey, but he has that nice, interesting vibe. I enjoy him. Thank you.
Well, in this day of virtual meetings, I think we can say that Casey was phoning it in. So.
Okay, I'm leaving now. Thanks, everyone.
I have very different things to say about Casey, but I say them in the privacy of my home and not in public. It has nothing to do with the fact that you are always working day and night.
Hyper organized, which I do appreciate. True.
So, and thank you, Deputy Chief Forrest. You have also been a great part of this process.
You are very welcome. My pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Hello.
I'm sorry. Hi, Andrea. It's Jill.
Hi, Jill.
Quick question. It doesn't look like we're meeting the first week of October. Is that correct?
It's
not on the work plan.
Oh, good. I've got the plan somewhere in my pile of papers here.
So I think the next, because that would be wonderful. Personally speaking,
we could use a break.
Well, the city of Richfield is having a retirement celebration for my mom.
Oh my goodness! Congratulations.
She doesn't know yet. The mayor needs to tell her.
Okay, you're right. We didn't have anything.
Okay, good.
We have next week, the 29th, and then not again until the 13th.
Excellent. I just wanted to double check.
Okay. And I know Jan was asking that question too, and that's going to be the 13th is going to be the last meeting when we have guests. And after that, we're going to be working on the report.
Okay, and I can do that and still count ballots. Good to hear. Okay.
So thank you all.
And I'll see Jill and Tony tomorrow morning.
Yes.
And I assume that it's going to pop up and tell me that I can join. I just hope that's how it works.
Yes. Yes. You should just be able to join the way you do these.
What about Commissioner Kozak? If he's going to be working with you, did you tell him about the meeting?
Andy, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, Jan, Tony, and I, as part of the redistrict. I'm sorry, Andrea, for hijacking your
No,
meeting.
that's okay.
We were going to get together to talk about just kind of the broad scope of work between our committees for redistricting to make sure that we either are not duplicating each other's work, or if we're doing similar things, that it's complementing one another's work. So we're going to meet tomorrow morning at 8:30. Can you make it?
8:30 on the Zoom?
Yep.
No, on
Teams.
Teams.
Or Zoom. Yeah, we're on Teams. If you send me the link, I'll join up.
Sounds great.
Jill, could I have a link too? Because I think that Matt and I are sort of upping our committee, and we probably need to know, at least to listen to part of that discussion.
Actually, we did have one question, I think, Jill, about the rules for selecting, that whole stuff about that we did last time for rules for selecting members and so forth. And it was a little confusing. I think the Rules Committee does that, but maybe it's going to be different this time. And do you want me to send that document, Jill, that I sent to you guys, you and Tony, to Andy and Andrea?
Yes, please. And then I'll send the invitation.
Perfect.
Yes. Did you have a question, Andrea?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if you would want the document too. And I don't know.
Yes. We need to do the procedures document together with the outreach committee. So what document?
No, you don't do the procedures for the outreach committee. You do the rules, don't you?
It's rules and procedures.
Right. And we raised this back when we were actually meeting on redistricting, and now I don't remember where we left off, but I know that we were planning to have a joint meeting because, again, for the same reason you're talking about, to see who was going to be doing what.
Yeah, we need to have a meeting. Okay, well, that should be fun tomorrow. I'll send you the document I put together, and we'll see where we go.
Okay, please copy me on that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. You, Angie, and Andy.
Okay, and then we can...
How many are there going to be on this meeting? How careful do we have to be about things such as open meeting law?
We only have 3. We have 3, 4, 5, 6. We should still be okay. Casey, are you gone? He's gone. He doesn't know. We would be 6 of us. Is that correct, Jill?
Yes.
Okay, so we should still be okay because what's quorum? 8? Where are we? Something I can't find it.
We're getting close.
I think we're okay with 6.
Yeah. Okay. Lyle, are you there?
Yeah, he's there.
Yeah, I'm here, and I was thinking, I was chair of the Rules Committee last time around 10 years ago. I don't get a copy of what we did at that time or not.
Oh, of what you did? Oh, I have it all.
Yeah,
it's all online. We saved every golden word.
Is it all in LIMS now? I think it is.
I think I put it into the Teams thing for Teams. I think there's a folder. It's called 2010, 2012, and there's a separate folder for rules. And what I did was I pulled documents off of the city's website that were linked from agendas or minutes. And so there's a tremendous amount of stuff there, most of which you just need to kind of rule out. But the final rules and everything should be there.
Yeah. Well, we circulated that. Lyle, I think we sent you those rules whenever we were meeting a couple of months ago.
I think so too, yeah.
Yeah, but I can send it to you again.
Okay, and I put it all in Google Drive too, but I believe that's probably inappropriate. I guess we're supposed to do everything through the city's thing. I tend to share stuff on Google Drive with people, so I don't know. But I think it's in Teams. I'll go look it up and see if I can figure it out.
Okay, but meanwhile, I'll send it to you just to make sure, Lyle.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay. Jana has a question. Jana, are you still on? Can you hear us?
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay. So you wanted to know if the application is out to replace Al?
Yep.
And I got an inquiry from a friend who was interested in flying, and he called and was told that the judge had not invited the new application process yet.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, I have gotten a couple of calls too.
So, okay, so we're not bound to that. I was looking at the city's appointments page, and they talked about doing things twice a year. And Matt would know more about this than most of us because he has to deal with openings on the Board of Adjustment and so forth. But they seem to imply that they only do the thing twice a year.
Well, but that's
different for the
we're
judge.
appointed by a judge.
I understand that, but we're kind of tied into that city thing a bit.
Yeah.
I think so they do that for city boards and commissions, committees, but since the Charter Commission is a creature of the state and it's not being appointed by the city council, I think they use the forms and the process, but they don't hold it to the same standard.
Right. And actually, now that I think about it, Casey checked with the judge, and the judge had not yet authorized the city to make the applications available for the Charter Commission.
Who's the chief judge right now?
The new
Todd Barnett.
new
Good.
Cahill seems to be busy with other things.
Yeah,
so.
it's not Cahill.
He's not the chief. No, he's not the chief
No.
judge anymore.
The chief judge is Todd Rick Barnett.
Okay.
He's our first chief judge of color for Hennepin
Right.
County.
Yeah.
And he's probably busy too. So, yeah, I don't know. There will be considerable interest in the position.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. And, I'm surprised people haven't figured out that there's a vacancy yet, but.
Well, because it hasn't been announced.
No, but there's been enough talk during meetings, and there's this missing body, and we talk, it doesn't take rocket scientists to figure this out. So.
Well, everybody, don't tell anybody, because my friend would be such a great addition to the Charter Commission. He's a retired judge. And,
so I have to tell you, I'm hearing a lot about it. There's a lot
Is he
of
a person of color?
about the opening.
No, he's not. That's the problem.
Oh, yeah.
People now think we're important.
Yeah. No, Andy, they just want to work with you. That's all
right.
it's about.
Yeah, Jill, your point is well taken. I'll discourage him from applying, even though he's wonderful.
Well, I'm thinking with all the pressure that we had this round,
right,
and all of the, and close examination of our demographics, it would behoove us to load up on, or no, I don't want to say that. That sounds awful.
Yes, it does.
Have greater representation of historically marginalized communities.
I get that completely. Yep.
And
We just say,
not only the demography, but the geography.
Right.
Good point.
But they have to be as brilliant as the people of color we already have on the commission.
Oh.
There's plenty of us out there.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go away now because my husband is wandering through the room here someplace, and I guess it's time for me to think about finishing dinner. So I will send those documents out to the other 3 people, and then we'll get together tomorrow morning.
And Jill, congratulations to your mom.
Yeah, and Jill, did you see my message that my husband knew her dad? He worked with him. That was hilarious. He said, wait a minute, Jill Garcia, wait, is her mother, I knew her father. So yes, we had this whole conversation.
You know my dad, so that was wonderful.
Yeah, that was fun. So, okay, I'm going. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Hi, Lyle,
Yes,
are you still hanging in there?
yes, I am.
I wanted to ask you, I mean, I don't necessarily mean to ask you in front of all these people, but I would love it if you would consider joining the government structure related work group.
I
was happy to do that. I sent an email to Barry because I have a number of people that are filling me with ideas.
Good.
From back in 1966 in Citizen League even.
I'm going to stop you all. We adjourned a meeting, and so it's actually a violation then for us to continue this meeting. We've told the public we've adjourned, and I noticed there's still comment going on. So I'm going to jump back on and say thank you, everyone, and please say goodbye and turn off the
answer is yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Casey. Say
Thank
goodbye.
you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks, Lyle. Bye.
Bye.